On tonight's episode, a man flees with ill-gotten gains and a gun still warm. The streets are empty, but the night is far from silent. When a lone taxi appears like a beacon in the darkness, it promises escape, or something far worse. A desperate passenger will learn that some rides don't end where you expect, and some drivers have destinations that no living soul should ever reach. This is a journey with no turning back. This is One-Way Fare. It was late at night, in a small town with Main Street drenched from a passing storm. A tall and lanky disheveled man was racing down the sidewalk, pockets full of bundled up bills and jewels, along with the revolver he had just used. The job hadn't gone exactly the way he had hoped, but things don't always go as planned. There was no one out on the streets, except for him, and no cars had passed by for a while. This made him feel uneasy despite the circumstances. His footsteps echoed off the walls of the quiet street with every splash, turning a corner, then another, until eventually he came across an old cab, idling at a dead-end street. The dim lamplight flickered above as if directing him. The sign showed it was vacant, and so he quickly jumped in. Without so much as a greeting, he urged the man to step on it. "What's the hurry, Slick?" the cab driver asked with a chuckle. He let his money do the talking and pulled out a $100 bill from the roll and dropped it on the front passenger seat. The driver picked it up and inspected it, as if to say, "I know where this came from," but pocketed the bill and took off without saying a word. The tall man stared out of the back window in desperation, and as they disappeared into the darkness, he could see the silhouette of two men round the corner. He chuckled to himself, smoothing back his dark wet hair with a wicked grin, pleased that he had managed to lose his pursuers. "Where to, partner?" the cab driver squawked as he adjusted the rearview mirror, staring into the dark eyes of the tall man. "Anywhere but here," he barked, gravel cutting through his voice, annoyed by all the questions. The cab driver smirked. He had somewhere in mind. "You're the boss." With that, he slammed on the accelerator and the car thrust forward violently, the tall man thrown back into his seat. "What's the big idea?" he screeched, drawing the revolver from his pocket and placing it behind the seat, the driver unaware. "Relax, champ. We'll be there soon." The driver smiled and continued pushing the beat-up yellow cab further down the winding road. The man was growing anxious, yelling and grabbing the seat in hopes of getting him to pull over. "You're going to get us killed," the tall man cried out. "Not too soon, I hope," the driver replied, laughing menacingly. "Stop the car and let me out." The tall man cocked the hammer back and pressed it to the driver's head. "Not until we get to where we're going." The cab driver swerved around a corner, and then another, then soon the pavement vanished, giving way to a narrow gravel road. The car bounced and shook, the suspension squeaking and groaning with every jump. The desperate man couldn't take it anymore and let off a warning shot next to the driver's ear, the bullet exiting out of the roof. His ears were ringing, but he didn't pay no mind. "Do you think I'm playing, old man? The next one won't miss," he screeched. But the driver said nothing. In a moment of desperation, he let his dark thoughts take over. To hell with this. The moment those words left his lips, he decided to pull the trigger. Another loud blast rang out inside the cab, darkness spraying the driver's side window. He slumped over the wheel, completely motionless, yet the car still barreled forward. The tall man leapt forward, fighting to control the wheel, pulling with all his strength this way and that, but to no avail. A large tree stood before him, ready to welcome them, but right when he thought it was going to be the end, the driver suddenly sprung to life, screaming in the tall man's face until he turned white as a sheet. The driver began to laugh, a dark laugh, eyes rolling back in his head. The tall man was confused and scared, feelings he hadn't felt in a very long time.
"We're almost there,"
the driver said in a low voice.
"Better buckle up."
The tall man cringed and tightened his grip on the seat in front of him, his nails tearing into the leather. Up ahead was an old bridge that had been shut down a long time. Rotten wood and rusted metal were all the man could see, and they were going right for it. "Stop the car." The thin man put a few more shots into the driver's head, hoping it would stop him, but he just shook it off and kept laughing. Closer and closer, they came to the bridge until finally, they began to cross, the wooden planks bouncing and cracking beneath the weight of the cab. The mad driver looked back at the man, who had tears in his eyes, and smiled. Then suddenly, he cranked the wheel, and they broke through the guardrail, metal and wood crunching under the impact. The old yellow taxicab soared over the edge, and for a moment their bodies were weightless. As they fell hundreds of feet, the tall man did not see what should have been the waiting river below. But instead, he saw the twisted figures and fiery lakes of their destination. The tall man screamed in terror, and the cab driver howled in excitement. The two men from earlier went east out of town after the cab, and after a while, they noticed the dark smoke trails in the distance and decided to follow, leading them directly to the bridge. When they arrived, they saw that the barriers had been broken and railings torn apart, as if a vehicle had gone right through them. Sitting neatly in a pile at the edge was their stolen family fortune, all accounted for. There was no longer any smoke that they could see. They looked over the edge, sure they would see some remnants of a horrifying crash, but were puzzled when they found nothing except the lingering smell of sulfur and a hushed dark laughter in the cold night air.